Conducting tonight's meeting in a virtual setting using Zoom pursuant to the provisions of the governor's executive orders. Council members and staff are participating from remote locations. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting live tonight on our website through the YouTube channel or through Zoom as noted on the agenda. We are having some technical issues, so Wave channel is directing you to either Zoom or to our YouTube channel. I did not receive any emails or voicemails, so those that would like to participate via live platform, please use the Zoom instructions that are on the agenda, and the mayor will begin the meeting momentarily.
Welcome to the November 10th, 2020 regular meeting, City of Lincoln, City Council, Redevelopment Successor Agency, and Public Financing Authority. I call this meeting to order. Roll call. City Clerk, may we please have the roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Andriotta.
Here.
Councilmember Gilbert.
Here.
Councilmember Joyner.
Here.
Councilmember Silhai.
Here.
And Mayor Carlskid.
Here. Next item on the agenda is report from closed session. We did not have a closed session meeting, so there is nothing to report. Next item is the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Public Safety Chief, Lee, will lead us in the pledge, please.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chief. Agenda modifications. Does anyone on the council want to modify the agenda?
No.
Nope.
Saying no comment, I will go on to the consent agenda. All matters on the consent agenda are continued.
Mayor,
Mayor.
we need to back up for public comment on non-agenda items.
Thank you very much. I hope they're not on the agenda. For the
Yes,
city.
Mayor, we do have a hand raised. Mr. Carver, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mayor and city officials. Just please allow me to get right to the point. As everyone is well aware, we no longer have a skate park in Lincoln. I was doing some research and found a story that was done by Roseville Today on March 21st, 2019 regarding a state audit on the city of Lincoln that found Lincoln to have mismanaged public funds and its insufficient accountability, etc. These dates are from 2014 to 2016 to 17. If this type of behavior had not taken place, the city skate park would likely been managed, maintained, and funded properly and still be here today. This insufficient accountability is still an obvious issue even today. The McBean Skate Park is a prime example of this lack of accountability. In the city's closing audit statement, I quote, "City staff and the city council look forward to engaging residents to address the heart of the city's challenges." That simply is not and did not happen. There's a few items on this agenda that I believe that there's lack of accountability in as well, and should be addressed. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Any other comments, Gwen?
Yes, Mayor. Byron Chapman, please go ahead.
Thank you, Gwen. Mr. Mayor, council members and city staff. 3 items. I did emailed over something to Gwen that had to do with the 3rd quarter of the investment activity report for the city. And it covered July, August, September this year, 2020. And I noticed a discrepancy. Did everyone receive the email that I'd sent out? I just want to make sure we're all talking about the
Yes, I
same page.
apologize, Mr. Chapman. I did send that out, so I neglected to mention that. Thank you.
That's all right. I simply wanted to point it out, the fact that the same number appears on all three reports. Thankfully, the portion that needed to be added up was correct on the lower right-hand side of the document. However, the upper was not. Literally, it's a good thing that the bottom did add up correctly. Had it not, there could have been a deficiency there of literally millions of dollars. So I don't know who is responsible for that, but if someone could take a look at that and find out to make sure that doesn't happen again, that pretty much takes care of that one. The other issue had to do with at the council meeting, or the special meeting that we had last week. I had made a comment about the manpower issues at the city and the city staff, and the city manager had made a comment towards the end and said that had no idea as to where I was getting the idea that the city was not fully staffed. So I went ahead and did a little bit of research, and it didn't take me long. The first one that came to mind was on September the 1st of this year. The city manager actually had a meeting that was called a special meeting, and it had to do with issues that deal with essentially administrative work, because the city manager and staff were pretty much having too many items on the agenda for them to take care of, and they brought that to the council. So the item basically, and these are words strictly from the packet of 4A on that date, the purpose of this is to balance the demands of the city's realities and the constrained an amount of time and money. And then as the report continued on, it also had the analysis and the findings, and it stated that the city is currently experiencing several challenges that have caused an excessive increase in workload. These challenges included staffing shortage due to current vacancies, lack of funding for positions. Many staff members are filling two traditional roles, and the coronavirus restrictions that have resulted in suffering results related to childcare and home care. And then down at the bottom, it had conclusions that it is in the best interest of the city to have an estimated set of work priorities, especially in a time when staff is stretched too thin.
Mr. Chapman, that is 3 minutes.
Okay, well, let me wrap it up and simply by saying, I'm really happy to hear that the city manager has said that there is not a problem with the manpower, and hopefully will not have the reason for not getting something done, which is we're too overworked and don't have enough people. Thank you very much.
Gwen? Are there any other?
Yes, Mayor. No, I have no other hands raised at this time.
Okay, I'll close public comment. Now we'll go to the consent agenda. All matters on the consent agenda are considered routine business and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the city council or a resident requests a specific item be removed from the consent agenda for separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the remainder of the consent agenda. Do any of my colleagues wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to remove 8G, please.
Okay, we will remove 8G. Do any of my colleagues wish to remove, how about the public? Does anyone in the public wish to remove an item?
Yes, Mayor, we do have a hand raised. Mr. Chapman, please go ahead.
Thank you, Gwen. Again, Byron Chapman. Mr. Mayor, if you could pull two items, 8I as in I, also 8 as in Nancy, 8N.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Carver, go ahead.
I'd like to pull 8H. I believe that's the 2020-207. Is that correct or no?
No.
What? 8H.
Oh, no. That's not the one.
207 is 8L.
Oh, okay. I don't see it. It's not on my,
Which,
Okay.
which item are you wanting to pull?
What do you want to pull?
yes, it was the 8L. That is correct. That's the one that's 2020-207. I believe
Yes, it
that's,
is.
okay.
Thank
Yes,
you.
please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No other hands are raised, Mr. Mayor.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the balance of the agenda, consent agenda.
Second.
I have a second. Motion and a second for the remainder of the consent agenda.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Gilbert,
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Andriotta,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
and Mayor Carlskin.
Yes. Okay, first item that was pulled is 8G. This
Yes,
item-
Mr. Mayor, I pulled this item. This is a simple contract for repaving the parking lot in Joyner Park. My family has property adjacent to that. And so out of an abundance of caution, I'm simply going to recuse myself from the item and step out of the room.
Thank you. Because it's being pulled for that reason, there's no need to have a staff report. The rest,
Move approval, Mr. Mayor.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second. 8G.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Councilmember Gilbert,
Yes.
Councilmember Andriotta,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
and Mayor Carlskin.
Yes. Okay, the next item that was pulled, 8I. That's Resolution 2020-204, authorizing a purchase order increase with Xylem Water Solutions. This was pulled by
Mr.
resident-
Chapman,
Mr. Chapman.
please go ahead.
And thank you, Gwen. My reason for calling this particular item is I wanted to make sure, as I was reading through the packet, on the very first page of the packet and at the very end, it was referring to Fund 721. And I believe the number should have been, I think it was 271 or 217. I'm looking for my notes. So I'm thinking that it's a typo. I just wanted to make sure that that's correct and they were referring to the fund in which the money was coming from.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is Public Works Director Ray Leftwich. That was on the fiscal impact statement. There is a reference. It was a typo. Wrote Fund 271, whereas Mr. Chapman is correct. It is Fund 721, which is the wastewater capital improvement fund.
Okay, so that from my understanding, it is 271, correct?
No, 721 in
It
City
is
of Lincoln Fund
721.
Code.
Okay,
Fund 721 is for wastewater capital replacement, and that is what this project is for.
okay. Well, thank you.
Okay, no further discussion. I'll accept a motion. for a-
Mr. Carver, are you wanting to speak on this item? You have your hand.
Yes, it was actually on the previous item, the 8G. I was wanting that one pulled as well, but I thought since he pulled it, it
Point
was
of
already,
order, Mr.
yeah.
Carver. Point of order, Mr. Carver.
Sorry.
We're not talking about the previous item. That matter is closed. It's only if you have a wish to comment on this item.
We only talk about. You have no comment on this item.
No, no hands are raised,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
I'll accept a motion to accept this
Move
item.
adoption.
I have a motion
Second.
and a second.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Gilbert,
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Andriotta,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
and Mayor Carlskin.
Yes. Item 8L was pulled by Mr. Carver. It's adopt resolution 2020-207, authorizing city manager to approve task orders for Engagement Brothers with NBS, PFM, and Stradling, Yoka, Carlson, and Ralph.
Go ahead, Mr. Carver, you're unmuted.
Yes, hello, Mayor. Yeah, I would like to pull 8L, just for transparency reasons. I would rather that it be continue the same as it was before. And I know I'm not supposed to speak on it, but I didn't know that I wanted to pull 8G as well, but obviously that matter's closed now, so there's no going back on that. Yeah, I would like to pull 8L though. Thank you.
So if you have a comment, you need to make it now, Mr. Carver.
Oh, for 8G?
No, for 8L.
8L.
We need to
yes.
we need to understand
like
your
to-
reason for pulling it.
I would like to see it pulled for transparency reasons. That's all. Thank you.
What does that mean, Mr.
What
Carver?
does it mean? Mr. Carver? What do you mean?
Yes, am I, okay. For transparency reasons, so if Ray Leftwich is able to sign the documents straightforward without anybody else dealing with it as well or approving it, then it's one person dealing with it directly with the people. So they should have accountability, more than one person that's actually approving this.
Mr. Carver, the whole point of this action is the city council is approving the action.
Right.
It's not just one person, it's the entire city council.
Okay, but as I read it, so can you go ahead and read AL out for me, please? If you'd be so kind. I don't
Mr.
have
Carver,
it in front of me.
Mr. Carver, this is not a go back and forth. You asked to pull the agenda item. We assume that you
Okay.
had a specific purpose for doing
I gave you
so.
the,
The
Yes.
item simply authorizes Mr. Leftwich to execute, or the city manager actually, to execute contracts with these parties to move forward with the formation of special finance districts. And so unless you have some specific comment or criticism, we really have no further discussion here.
okay, then thank you for your time.
Mr. Mayor, it might be important for Mr. Carver to understand that because Ray Leftwich is the city engineer, the people that are responsible for this item, his name appears on the agenda as the individual from staff that would respond to any questions. But like our city attorney said, these items must be approved by the entire, entire city council, and that's why it's on our agenda. And I'll make a motion to approve it.
Motion in a second. And do I have a second?
I'll second it, Mr. Mayor, but we've handled this a little awkwardly. So I think what I'd like to request before we actually take a vote is for the staff to do a brief staff report on this, just to flesh this out for everyone.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, thank you, Paul, for requesting that.
I'd be more than happy to do that. So the item that's before the city council this evening is requesting authorization to enter into letters of intent with a variety of different financial consultants that are typically utilized for the issuance of infrastructure bonds. When a developer is going to develop a particular area and they're going to rely upon bond financing, for the issuance of the bond and the process, we require the services of bond counsel, bond legal counsel, a variety of underwriters, also financial management consultants. And so essentially how that is usually done is through the signing of an engagement letter. And then the engagement letter actually allows for legwork to be completed for the community facilities district to be formed and the bonds to be subsequently issued. The action before the city council tonight is only to request authorization for the engagement letters itself. This is really the first step of the process. There are subsequent steps in the formation of a community facilities district that do come before city council prior to the bond issuance. So although the city council would be approving this item this evening, what this does is it just allows us to engage the consultants necessary to begin the legwork for the formation documents that have to be developed prior to them coming before city council for official approval. When a bond is issued for infrastructure, the city council specifically has to adopt a resolution that identifies the local obligations. And that local obligation resolution is what identifies essentially the amount of the bond issuance, the term of the bond issuance, and then what specifically can the bond proceeds be used for. So this is just the first step in quite of a lengthy process. In the past, the city has typically stuck with the same bond counsel as well as financial advisors without soliciting input from other types of consultants. So this item before the city council, essentially cleanup. It is some of the engagement letters or requests for approval to enter into the engagement letters, as with NBS, PFM Financial Advisors, which is also currently our financial advisor, and then straddling, which is bond counsel. And so this is just the first step in a many-step process for the future issuance of bonds as they relate to new developments. And with that, I can answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was helpful.
Yes.
Yes,
And-
thank you very much.
Any other comments? I might make a comment that generally, when one asks for an item to be pulled, they've read the staff report and all of the attendant documents that are available on the website, and they have a problem with it. Something's wrong or there's a question that isn't clearly expanded on in the staff report. So having said that.
Yeah, and can I though, just for an alternate perspective on that, I think, yeah, that's true. But I also think that we want to be a really user-friendly city. And if a member of the public doesn't know, standard procedure, or maybe didn't have a chance to comb through our agenda, but took the time to show up at our meeting and they want to pull something and don't necessarily have a pointed comment, they just know they want to hear it. I kind of feel like it's on us to just explain it and give the staff report like Jennifer did, which was really helpful, and try and facilitate that being really accessible, transparent, user-friendly process. So I agree with you, but I also think that that shouldn't necessarily guide the way that we respond to things that don't fall into that, structure.
And with all due respect, I could be wrong, but I don't think we offered public comment on item 8G that we pulled. We straight to a vote. And I don't know if we were supposed to or not, but I don't think we allowed for that either. So
8G was pulled because one of the council people felt he needed to recuse himself.
Okay.
Not because there was a question.
Okay.
About the item.
Okay.
I thought I cleared that up.
However, I don't think that was identified at the beginning of the meeting. So when it was pulled, if somebody already thought it was going to be pulled, they might have assumed that there would naturally be discussion and not also requested it. So I do think it was a little quirky the way we handled it.
Well,
Yeah, but thank you though.
Yeah, the council member that had the problem indicated that he wanted to recuse himself from the vote. And so I think that made it quite clear that individual was removing himself from discussion, if any, and vote. So I think that's in that particular case, it was obvious why that item was pulled and why that council member recused himself.
I know we're off base, but I only think it's obvious to people who've spent a lifetime in public service and who understand what that means. I think to somebody who's just a member of the public who wanted to come and listen to an item, they don't necessarily know that there wouldn't be a discussion legally following someone recusing themselves. So I do think that I just think that if whatever we can do to be really user-friendly, I think we want to be that city.
Well, yeah, I agree with you. And the public certainly had the opportunity to ask any questions. They could have pulled that item and asked questions if they did not understand why a council member was recusing itself. So I think it's important that we be as open as we can with the public. But, you know, there's a certain point where you over-explain things, which causes more confusion than clearing a matter up. So I think the fact that it was very obvious why the council member decided not to take part in the vote.
I apologize for not pulling this item for discussion. So can we get on with the vote on this item?
We can.
We can.
I need a motion. Oh, no.
I have a motion in a second, I believe.
Right.
We just need a vote.
Can we have the vote? Gwen?
My Zoom on my laptop. So Councilmember Gilbert,
Yes.
Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
and Mayor Carlskent.
Yes.
I think you skipped me.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Andriotta.
That's okay. Yes.
The next item that was pulled, 8N Nancy, to adopt resolution 2020-210, approving annexation number 2, Village 25 to the city CFD.
So Mayor, for what it's worth, I've always found it useful to do a brief staff report on these once they're pulled.
Yeah,
That might actually answer the questions that the individual who requested it be pulled might have.
okay. Who is going to handle this?
I would be more than happy to, Mayor. The item before the City Council this evening regarding to the annexation of Village 25 into CFD 2018-2 is related to the Public Safety CFD that the City Council formed in 2018. As projects are starting to be built, the city now requires the annexation into the Public Safety CFD. And what this does is it provides for an annual assessment to be charged on a parcel by parcel basis that is intended to fill in the funding gap between the funding that or revenue that is available on a parcel by parcel basis through property and sales tax versus the cost it is needed to the cost that is required to provide those services to that parcel. So this project is Village 25 within the Village 12 Bridges specific plan area, is located off of East Joyner Parkway and Bella Breeze. And this will just simply provide additional funding for both police and fire services. And with that, I can answer any questions.
None from me.
I think, would you ask for questions from the public?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chapman, please go ahead.
Thank you, Gwen. Mr. Mayor, council members, and city staff, again, Byron Chapman, 12 Bridges area. As I read through the packet, I understand the need to do that and why things are doing the way they are. But my two concerns are, I did read in the packet to where the tax will be on an annual basis. And the language of it too also states that in its perpetuity, definition being forever until somebody takes that tax out. And my thought on that was simply this: if you get to a point based on property taxes and the homes that are there now, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years goes by, people move in, people move out. The cost of the home, I'm just guessing at this point, I'm assuming that it goes up. Over a period of time, 12, 15, 20 years, does that tax stay in place even though the price of the homes most likely have gone up? And that also, does the tax, I do know that the tax indeed does have a calculator on it to adjust for that every year. I'm just trying to find out, is it that this tax goes on forever? Or is there a point in time where this tax would no longer be required? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if you'd like, I can answer that question.
Yes, please.
Yes, Mr. Chapman, the tax does go on forever. The escalator that is was included in the formation documents, or actually a subsequent action, was that the assessment can be increased by the CPI each year, which is the inflation index plus 3%. However, at any given time, the city council could decide to not levy the tax in any specific year. It should be noted that this CFD and the assessments that will be paid on a parcel by parcel basis are different and separate from the taxes that are paid under the 1% ad valorem. And so this is an assessment that is specifically used to pay for that delta between the revenues achieved from the residential parcels through property and sales tax. But it does go on for forever. There's no end date in the formation documents. The city council could make the determination at some point in the future that they did not any longer want to collect the fee or the assessment if that was so desired by the council.
And Mr. Chapman, in layman's term, this covers the gap funding between what that residential unit produces in revenue for the provision of public safety services and the actual cost of providing those services to that home.
And if I'm not mistaken, this is like the rest of the special assessment districts and the other funds, in that there's an engineering report or analysis done every year to validate that we're collecting the correct amount, not over collecting or under collecting. Is that true, Ms. Hanson?
Correct. The idea is definitely not for over collection. And when the assessments are placed on the tax rolls on an annual basis through action by the city council, any adjustments that would be needed to address any surplus in revenue could be made at that time.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public?
No, Mayor.
Okay. Bring it back to the council.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move approval of the item.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
Councilmember Andriotta,
Yes.
Councilmember Gilbert,
Yes.
and Mayor Carlskent.
Yes. We go on to 9 public hearings. There are none.
Excuse me, Mayor. I believe we had one other item pulled from the consent, 8H.
No.
Is that correct?
No, I think that was the mistake and it was corrected
Okay.
to 8L.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I didn't have it on my list. General business item 10A, receive the COVID-19 report from our city manager.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. This evening, I don't have a whole lot to report, with the exception that unfortunately Placer County as a whole has been placed back into the red tier, and it does appear that we may be trending back into purple next week, but hopefully we can get our numbers back under control through all of the recommended actions such as mask wearing and social distancing. I don't have a whole lot of other items to report related to COVID-19, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Is anybody on the council?
I don't have a question, but did want to just maybe reiterate or have you reiterate. I've gotten contacted by several over the last, couple weeks who are understandably concerned that numbers in the county are rising, that Lincoln is leading in some of those numbers, and that they're, have frequented some businesses that, are not mandating masks being worn or have taken their signs down, and are really upset because they feel that the city is the one who is saying, hey, we're past this, we don't need to worry about it. And so I did just want to reiterate for anyone who's watching that my understanding is that the city continues to follow, recommending CDC protocol, wear a mask, keep your distance and minimize any group gatherings. And that that is the intent, is to continue to slow the spread and try and keep our numbers safe for folks.
Yeah, yes, that is correct. The city handles any enforcement requests or complaints through the code enforcement office, and we typically start with educating, and have been very successful with educating. So if any residents have any concerns at all, when they do reach out, we do reach out to the local business and share our concerns, and typically we have really good response with that. I think overall, our residents in the city of Lincoln are very responsible, and they understand the benefit of not only keeping our numbers low, but also protecting our business community as well as our more vulnerable populations.
I appreciate that. I think it might make some people feel a little more at ease to hear that come from the city.
Definitely.
Okay, if there's no more council questions, I'll open it to discussion with the public. Would anybody like to make a comment from the public?
No hands are raised, Mayor.
I'll close public comments. Any other comments or discussion about the COVID-19 item? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 10B, adopt resolution 2020-217, authorizing the city manager to execute the limited term property tax increment agreement between the County of Placer County and the City of Lincoln as to tax rate areas 003-002, 003-007, 003-017, and 003-020. Our city manager, Jennifer Hanson, will give a brief staff report.
And Mayor Carlskin, I normally would not do this, but would you like to take the honors of presenting this item, or would you like me to?
You mean you would not give me normally the honors?
You were just a very integral part of this item, and so I certainly did not want, I would want to give you the honors if you'd like to present it. Otherwise, I'm more than happy to.
I appreciate the honor, but you will probably do a better job.
I doubt that. So the item before City Council this evening is requesting authorization to execute the limited term property tax increment agreement between the County of Placer and the City of Lincoln as it relates to 4 tax rate areas. So these are, I'll just use the last 4 numbers, area 002, 007, 017, and 020. So anytime that an area that is in the unincorporated portion of the county is annexing into a city's urban limits or the city limits, it is required by state law for the county and the city to go through tax sharing negotiations and enter into a tax sharing agreement to determine how the revenues associated with the 1% ad valorem tax will be split once the annexation is complete. The idea being that once the annexation is complete, the county will have less services or less responsibility to provide services, and the city will take over some of those services. A really good example of the types of services that we're discussing are related to both police and fire, as well as the library. The City of Lincoln, the 4 tax rate areas that are subject to this agreement cover just about the entire city with the exception of some of the older parts of town. And when those areas were annexed into the city, as required, entered into tax sharing negotiations with the county and executed those tax sharing agreements, which now impact how that 1% ad valorem tax is distributed between all of the agencies that are part of that 1% of ad valorem. One thing that's important to note is that it's not just the city and county that divide the property taxes. The lion's share of all property taxes goes to the school district, as well as to the state required educational realignment fund, which is intended to equalize education opportunities across the state and amongst income areas. Back in 2019, when the state audit first occurred and we really started to do a complete financial overhaul for the city, one of the things that we really started to look at on the staff and council level were the various revenue streams that are feeding into the general fund and are causing deficient general fund revenues and are greatly impacting the city's ability to provide adequate police and fire services. As the council is well aware, the city of Lincoln does have the lowest per capita police officer per capita ratio within the entire state of California at this time. When we first initiated these discussions, we started to speak with the county regarding was there any appetite to renegotiate how those property taxes were originally spent. So for an example, for about $485,000 home assessed value, the ad valorem property tax is limited to the 1% of the assessed value. And so what that means is all those agencies I previously discussed have to split that 1% of the pie. So for about a $450,000 house, the city in most areas gets around $350 a year in property taxes. So when we originally started working with the county, they indicated that they were not interested in renegotiating those property taxes. And, you know, I can't blame them from the standpoint that renegotiating those property taxes would impact their own revenue and their own ability to provide service. But through the great work of Mayor Carl Scant and support from all the city council, as well as from a commitment of leadership from Supervisor Wygant, as well as Chair Gore, Supervisor Gore is currently the chair of the Board of Supervisors. We entered into a very long round of negotiations to negotiate a change to those existing agreements. And what essentially was finally negotiated is a temporary limited term property tax increment agreement. The word increment applies to the increase in property tax that occurs on an annual basis. And that occurs essentially for 3 reasons. Per Prop 13, all property tax is based off of the assessed value of a home. And per Proposition 13 that was passed a long time ago, that assessed value can only increase by 2% per year. So that little amount of property tax revenue associated with that 2% increase in annual assessment is one part of the increment. Another part of the increment is anytime that a person does a significant improvement to their parcel, such as a pool, then your assessed value gets increased. And then thirdly, anytime a home is sold or a new home is built, the increased assessed value associated with the home sale or the construction of the new home is also referred to as the increment. And so with the property tax agreement before the city council this evening, that was also already thankfully adopted by the Board of Supervisors, includes several items in it. And essentially what it allows for is that over the next 8 years, the city of Lincoln, instead of receiving a very limited portion of the increment assessed value or the tax associated with increase in the increment on an annual basis, the city of Lincoln will receive 98% of the increment, and this county will take 2% of the increment. And what this essentially does is it is going to allow the city of Lincoln to build our property tax base up over the years that are included within this agreement. So there is an 8-year initial term, and then there is a 2-year extension that is allowed for. The 2-year extension is based off of the city of Lincoln successfully passing some type of sales tax measure. It is anticipated that the property tax increment revenue cap there's a revenue cap associated with on an annual basis. So on an annual basis, our base can't grow more than $1.5 million per year. And then there is an additional cap associated with an extension. The extension is allowed, like I stated previously, based for another 2 years. It's the extended term. And this is required should the city voters approve supplemental sales tax or transaction tax to augment city services or other associated services. At any time during the initial term of this agreement, then the agreement will be extended for 2 full fiscal years beyond the initial term. So the initial term will begin July 1st, 2020. So it's retroactive back to July 1st. And then it will go through fiscal year 27, 28. And then we would get taken through the next 2 fiscal years with the extended term. The agreement is limited to the 4 tax rate areas that we referenced below, or I previously referenced. There is a cap associated with the initial term and the extended term. And then there was a requirement for cooperation by both parties and regional interests. This was to ensure the future cooperation between the city and the county on interests that are of regional interest to all parties, which includes the Tier 2 funding commitment agreement, potential transportation sales tax initiative, regional sewer, and the Placer County Conservation Program. There are default requirements included in the agreement, and this essentially states that the funding or revenue associated with this agreement can only be used for police and fire services. There is also a slight administrative charge associated with the implementation of this agreement. We do anticipate that that will be less than $5,000 on this initial year, and then should be decreased annually thereafter once they kind of get the program set up. And then lastly, there is a biannual review that is included within the agreement that includes 2 council members as well as 2 board of supervisors. And that is the gist of the agreement. I can personally say that I think this is going to be one of the most beneficial things to the city's ability to provide police and fire services. As the city council is aware, and the city council, it's not just a city council priority, but it's also a staff priority that we improve our ability to provide public safety services. So this is going to be something that is greatly beneficial to the residents within the city of Lincoln. This does not mean that our hard work is over. It just means that we are finally kind of getting a leg up on some of our challenges. So I am really excited to see the additional revenue that comes in related to this agreement. The city council should choose to approve it this evening. I'd also be remiss if I did not acknowledge the good work of Mayor Carl Skint. Mayor Carl Skint did everything in his power to make sure this agreement went forward. And I know many of you also worked, the council worked on the back end through various channels to also gain support for this agreement. So I did just want to thank the mayor as well as the rest of the council. As the city manager, also as a resident, this was very, very important to me. And so I'm really excited to see that we've gotten to this day. And with that, I can answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the council?
I do have one question. Well, I want to reiterate what I said last time. The thanks. I know Jennifer already, said that too, but the 2 of you did a lot of work, and yeah, we all did our part on the back end, but you guys put a lot of effort, and really thanking the Board of Supervisors for their willingness to work through this also. And so I really think that this is such a great accomplishment and a new day for Lincoln, and I'm really excited about it. So thank you again for all your hard work, and I know the community feels that way too. Everyone's very excited about it. My question is once this kicks in, how fast can we start implementing like recruiting and hiring and that sort of thing for police and fire?
Which is a great question. So I was just speaking with Chief Lee earlier this week regarding that same question. And I think that what a prudent approach would be is for us to start getting the kind of recruitment end of items together. And then we will have to make a proposal to City Council to increase the full-time equivalent authorization that is typically handled in the annual budget to City Council for approval before we officially hire anybody. But what this will allow us to do is we don't get our first property tax payment until January of each year. So I would really like to see that first property tax payment to understand how much retroactive revenue we'll be getting back to July 1st. And then I think once we have a look at those numbers, we'll be able to make a solid proposal to City Council. Because one thing to remember is the numbers that are included in the agreement are based off of financial modeling or fiscal analysis. And there's a lot of assumptions that go into those models. And so I do think it would be prudent to get our ducks in a line, but really wait till we get that January property tax payment to see how beneficial or how much money we'll be achieving the first year.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. Well, no, that makes sense. But what you said is perfect because there's a lot of work in recruiting and getting all of that taken care of. So I appreciate that if we can start working on that and be prepared And then when that money kicks in, then we can actually pull the trigger. I think that's great. Thank you. And January is not that far away.
Any other questions?
No questions, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important that we don't mislead folks. The maxing out of potential revenue on this annually is heavily dependent upon property values continuing to rise, additional homes coming into the mix. And if we somehow hit a rough spot in the economy and property values drop, there's no assurance of what this is going to do for us. So we need to look at this realistically and optimistically as well. And I am optimistic. There's been a lot of very hard work by both the city manager, the mayor, and staff, as well as the county. This was a very creative solution to the challenge that was before us, and one that the county was not initially, the county is not obligated in any way, shape, or form to have agreed to do this. But I think they saw the need and the difficulties that previous tax sharing agreements had placed us in, and wanted to assist and did so. So I'm very grateful for them as well, and their willingness to partner with us on this, to the benefit, I think, really of both the county and the city of Lincoln. Those are my only thoughts.
Yeah, I'd just like to piggyback on what Paul said and just extend my official, public thanks to the county for being so willing to continue in discussions, even when it was difficult or when it didn't make sense, and to get to a place where we were able to find a solution, and they were such good stewards, I think, of the regional picture and the regional needs, which is sometimes hard to be able to prioritize and to see. And so I'm really appreciative of that, and also really thankful to both Mayor Carlskent and to Jennifer for being so dogged in your approach and determined to find a solution, because I think that what ended up being passed and what's before us tonight is, like Paul said, it's very creative. And I think that without the creativity that both Ms. Hansen and Mayor Carlskent brought to this, that we would still be like little hamsters running on a wheel trying to chase a dream that's not ever going to come. So I really appreciate the work of everyone, and think that even though what Paul said, I think is very true, that, the economy can do whatever it does, and it could, and if in many years' time, we'll look back and this will be a landmark for the city where we are far better off with it than we have been without it. So thank you.
Mayor.
Vice Mayor Gilbert.
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly, I want to underscore the kudos for yourself and our city manager. But I'd also like to say that when we were asked to contact people, President Gore, who, as we all know, was a city council person and a good friend of Lincoln's for many years, was very, very receptive when I approached her about supporting this, as well as when I spoke with Supervisor Wygant. He was equally as anxious to find a way to support Lincoln. And so I wanted to go on record as saying that thank you publicly to those two elected officials, not to downplay the role of any other supervisors who supported us, but those two in particular were very receptive, asked some good questions, but became champions for what we were all looking for in Lincoln. So thank you for that.
I think that promoting Chair Gore to president was a very kind thing for you to do in response to her cooperation. I'm sure she appreciated that.
President of the board. I think they use that title, don't they?
No.
Chair.
Chair? Okay. My apology.
No.
My Chairman Gore. We already are fooling around with the president now. I don't want to get her in the mix.
my comments are, there were some unintended results of this that I think that I was very pleased. I think Lincoln as a city gained some stature with county staff. I think that they realize that we are a good and can be a great regional partner in a lot of things. The difference between the first set of meetings and the last set of meetings on all levels was phenomenal. And that was due in large to the effort of Ms. Hanson in achieving a level of credibility with the staff of the county and a respect that she gained. There are a whole lot of things that I think will ultimately come out of this that will benefit the city and the county. Obviously, the primary goal was to help our funding situation, but I think there are going to be some ancillary results that weren't necessarily expected. It was, took a lot longer than I thought, but it was worth it, and it was at times fun. Anyway, I'll now open this item of this discussion with the public. Does the public have any questions? Gwen?
No, Mayor, I don't see any hands raised.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, before we move on to a motion, I just want to, as Councilmember Silhai says, piggyback on your comments. I think it's really important to note that this is not a singular action. We have promised in the terms of agreement to cooperate, both parties to cooperate in good faith on regional interests, including Tier 2 funding agreement, the regional sewer and future South Placer Regional Transportation Sales Tax, and the PCCP. So this is more than a one-off. This is an agreement to work together on items of regional significance. So I just wanted to point that out and really kind of bolster what you've already said about how this has become more than we'd originally intended, and for the better, I think.
I definitely think it's for the better. And I think that they will value our support in whatever regional endeavors that we attack in the future.
Mm-hmm.
If there's no more comments.
I have one last comment, Mayor.
Okay.
Of course, we all know I'll be leaving the council soon. To that end, this is going to bring very needed revenue to the city. And of course, we've all had the commitment to improve our public safety. And I would imagine, although I won't be around, that that will continue to be the #1 priority for this fund, for these funds. But we should take note that about 3 years ago, we put together a program, without getting into any details, where we are getting additional income for each and every home that's built. Matter of fact, for anything that's built in Lincoln for now and into the future. And although we don't get a lot of this results today or next week or next month, I think from a long-term standpoint, it would be fair to say that there won't be too far in the future where Lincoln's public safety will not be the lowest ratio in the state. We're going to improve that. We'll never fund like some of the very large cities that have multi-billion dollar commercial income. But I think long-term, it's going to have tremendous effect on the community that we've all served and you all will continue to serve. So it's been my honor to work with you all. And although I wasn't involved in this particular issue directly, I think it's a compliment to the council and our staff that we fought our way through some very, very difficult financial times. It's still challenging in Lincoln, but the future looks bright for our town. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. I will, if
I'll
somebody,
make a motion to approve the item.
You know what? Peter, let's do this one by the book. It's a big one, so let's.
Go ahead, Paul. Paul, do the
Sure.
book.
All right. So motion to adopt resolution 2020-217, authorizing the city manager to execute the limited term property tax increment agreement between the County of Placer and the City of Lincoln as to tax rate areas 003-002, 0003-007, 003-017, and 003-020.
Is that second one real or is there an extra zero?
No, it's correct.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second.
Yes, Councilmember Joyner,
Yes.
Councilmember Andriotta,
Yes.
Councilmember Gilbert,
Yes.
Councilmember Silhai,
Yes.
and Mayor Carlskent. Hey.
Stop that right now.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
We would have outvoted you 4-1. So.
Okay, we go on to council initiated business. Do any of my colleagues have any items that they'd like to initiate?
Mr. Mayor, I have one, and I'd like the city attorney to listen to me. And if I say more than I should say, please stop me. As we all know, we had an item that was going to be on the agenda tonight, and our staff saw need to remove it. And it had to do with the Pioneer and a couple of other agencies joining Pioneer. I'm not going to actually speak to that, but I want to share with you some information, and I don't believe anybody else from our city, council or our staff participated in our meeting the other day, late last week on Friday. And this item, I guess, will be on your next council meeting agenda. And I'll be going off to council prior to that. So if it's okay, I'd like an opportunity to say that there's been some questions asked by members of city councils about shouldn't these new entities be paying their way into Pioneer. And we had a pretty lively discussion. And the way it ended up was the actions that the cities are going to be taking, along with the county now, to move to the next step will allow plenty of time for the negotiations, if possible, to go on between Pioneer and its members and the new members, because then there will be a vote in approximately 90 days. And at that time, if the cities decided they wanted a buy-in amount, I keep saying cities, if the Pioneer members, because it also includes the county, and they decided they didn't want to pay it, then the deal's off. Conversely, if whatever is negotiated they agree to, then the agreement would go to the next step. So I know that there were some questions about that. maybe someone from the council or staff should get with the staff of Pioneer and get this information to the remaining 4 members of our council, because I think it's a very important issue that won't be solved now, but there will be an opportunity to do something about it before the final decision has to be made by the member cities.
Correct. And thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. That was part of the reason that this agenda item was pulled this evening, is because we had these questions. And so we've reached out to staff at Pioneer to get answers so that we can flush out our staff report and have a more complete picture for City Council at our first meeting in December. So there will be a fuller, more robust discussion about the issues you highlighted for us.
Great. Thank you very much for allowing me to share that.
I would assume we have traditionally just the one meeting in December, not the 2. So at the only meeting in December.
Correct. We'll have the workshop the first Tuesday, and then the regular standing meeting on the second Tuesday, and then the fourth Tuesday is dark.
And so will this item be on the workshop first and then come to council next?
No, likely it will only come to City Council. I do have a meeting with Mr. Eckert later, I believe it's actually next week, regarding the topic to better understand the financial impacts of this agreement. And at that time, I can send some information out. And then if the council desires, we can workshop the item as well on December 1st.
My intent is to meet with him as well, just to flesh out a few things. I understand Rockland has taken up the item tonight.
Correct.
And Auburn has some issues as well. So I think what I've heard is that there is at least 1, possibly 2 off ramps to a final agreement on this.
Yes, you're right. And my understanding, the last time I spoke with our executive director, Pioneer, all of the other agencies will be the last participant to actually take this up on an agenda here in Lincoln. So by the time it comes to us, there's going to be a lot of questions asked and hopefully answered with good information. So going last may be very valuable.
Yeah. It's probably about as far as we can take this conversation.
Yes, I was just going to suggest that. Thank you, Councilmember Joyner.
You're muted, Dan.
Still muted. We can't hear you.
Any more items to be initiated? That was actually more of an information item, I think, but I'll go on to information items. Does anyone have any information items they'd like to share?
Not tonight.
Not tonight. Okay, then I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all, and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.